Well, I often get the question, why did a nice girl like you end up in a field like violence? You know, did you have people influencing you? I mean, how did you get there? And my answer to that has always been violence taught me, violence itself. I'll just give a couple of examples of what I mean here. My first exposure to it was in high school. I took German. My German teacher was from Leipzig. He was a child during World War II. As some of you may know, Leipzig was firebombed during the war. The city was destroyed. And he didn't tell us anything about that. It was just a German class. And then one day, the fire alert siren went off, and he dove under the desk. And it took him several minutes to come up. And when he came up, he told me what happened to Leipzig. He was lucky to survive. He sustained burns. His account was very graphic. And that was it. It just so happened that not long after that, I sat through a lecture in one of my courses on the Holocaust. And part of that lecture was accompanied by photographs and film reels of the opening of the concentration camps. And so between those two things, the firebombing, and then on the other hand, the concentration camps, I developed a lasting interest in the history of conflict, but specifically the history of violence and ultimately the history of group violence. There were some personal things that happened as well, because I did end up in collective violence. I was working in my early 20s in Boston. And in working there, I was working in an Italian deli in a mixed race neighborhood. And it was directly across the street from a major police station. So we had African Americans, some of them criminals coming in, self-confessed proud criminals coming in, and then police officers. And I became friends with sort of both sides. Well, it happened in the 70s that Spiro Agnew, President Nixon's vice president, had a well-announced trip to Boston. And the whole city, which had undergone some ghetto riots, was expecting serious trouble. And I went there. I lived nearby where the gathering, where the confrontation was going to take place. And when I got there, the police line was already there. And I'd been told by the police what exactly they were going to do. They had dogs ready to go. They had police on horses. And then on the other side was a huge crowd of protesters insulting the police and throwing cans in their direction, but nothing to provoke anything. But I realized that I had friends on both sides. And I was standing there saying, please don't anybody do anything to get this going. And so nothing happened, fortunately. But part of the group of protesters went over into Cambridge and just tore up businesses and banks and did a lot of destruction. And that was it. From then on, I was going to pursue collective violence as a subject. And I suppose I should add one other thing. Since I became interested in interethnic and interracial conflict, my mother and I went to Africa on a extended tour. She was an art historian interested in African art, and she wanted to look at African arts and crafts. We traveled all around Africa, ultimately ended up in Uganda. We ended up in Uganda right when Idi Amin Dada, a mentally ill, vicious, tribally oriented dictator came in, and there was a lot of violence. It was so bad that some of the staff at the university where we were staying said, we've got to get you out of here. The last time we had collective violence here, they went after all the white people. So it wasn't any particular individual that influenced me. It was just a fortuitous series of events that touched on collective violence that just kept building and building and building over time, and which ultimately culminated in a book that I did on the Springfield, Illinois race riot of 1908.